earlier than I would normally put videos out. Normally I release my content at midnight on Friday UK time and midnight on Tuesday UK time. But today's video is coming out today because today would have been Alex's birthday. If you saw my community post, you'll see that I mentioned that I lost a very close friend of mine. He passed away on the 2nd of February 2022. I didn't learn about it for a couple of days when a friend of mine messaged me and said, "Have you seen the post from Alex's mom?" And I basically ran out of the office crying. You may feel that you may feel this video is monopolising on tragedy, but I'm not monetised, and I wanted to make this video because I wanted to tell you all about my friend, and because for me it's important to remember the good times and remember the memories, and I feel like I have to get it out now and have to say it now, because I feel like if I did this in a year's time or 2 years' time, the stuff that I forget, there's things that I forgot that I kind of remembered when I was talking about Alex to friends. So I rearranged some content. The video that I did have planned for this Friday, I'll push it to next Friday. And I guess I'm just going to talk. I don't like doing 2 videos of the same 2 weeks in a row, but 2 rambles in a row. So if you enjoy my ramble videos, I guess you're in luck. And I'm just going to talk about Alex, how I met him, the course of our friendship. So I met Alex in the summer of 2008. I was just 18 and he must have been, I want to say 20, because he's 2 years older than me. And I can't believe I'm going to tell this story for, trigger warning, video is going to feature adult themes. If you can't hear that, just click off now. I can't believe that I'm going to tell this story to the 10 people that watch this video. 25 at a push. But yeah, Alex was dating one of my friends from school, and I had just broken up with a guy who was a bit of an asshole, and I was going through some stuff mentally, and so I don't know how the conversation came about between Alex and his girlfriend, but they messaged me because they wanted someone who would take part in a threesome with them, and they picked me, and I said yes. So that happened. But then after that, I know parts of this video will this timeline's going to be very confusing because a lot of the things I'm saying as they come into my head. It was the summer before I went to university, and Alex was at university in York but lived in Newcastle, and I was from York, and I'd applied to Northumbria University in Newcastle, and I was actually at Alex's house the morning I got the UCAS email saying that I had a place at Northumbria University. So, like, you know, a massively key part of my life, I was with this person. So after the relationship, fallout of the relationship, I was like getting ready to move up to Newcastle. Alex actually went to my like leaving drinks in York. I think it was the leaving drinks in York where he told me that I was the most cold, unemotional person he'd ever met. I used to really struggle to express my emotions because of some stuff. If you've ever seen my other story time, you'll understand. But basically, yeah, two abusive relationships, one immediately after the other, doesn't really do good things for your ability to open up emotionally. Also, there's just issues from my childhood and parents that meant that I was very emotionally closed off. But yeah, he said that I was one of the most emotionally closed off people he'd ever met, or something along those lines. When I moved up to Newcastle, I think he did come and stay at my halls like a couple of times, but then because I was a massive bitch, he basically ended up falling out with me at some point between September and December 2008. We didn't speak after that until, I want to say, the February or March of 2009. I can't even remember how we got back in touch, who messaged who. It was probably on MSN, which ages the story, but I'm already giving you years, so you know when it happened anyway. And I had actually bought a ticket for download that year, and I'd mentioned, I'm gonna have to book the big green coach. If you don't know what Download Festival is, it used to be called Monsters of Rock. It's this massive music festival at Donington Park in Derbyshire or Derbyshire. I never know where I'm saying that right. And it's a 3-day event, 5 days if you do the full 5 days camping. And it's like metal and rock music. And you used to have like the big green, well, it's probably still a thing, I don't know, the big green coach company that would do like coaches from all around to take you to Download. And I was about to book the coach because I was like, well, I've got no other way of getting there. And I'd mentioned to Alex, I'm going to book the coach because I don't know how I'll get there any other way. And he was like, oh, well, I'll take you. And I was like, you sure? And he was like, yeah, no problem. Like, we'll camp together and we'll sort all of that out. You sort a tent out and I'll drive. So I'd stayed at his like the night before Download, and then we'd gone off. We'd set off ridiculously early. It must have been about 7 a.m. because Alex wanted to not get stuck in the metro centre traffic. Because if you're from the northeast, you'll know how bad the traffic up to the metro centre can get during rush hour. So we'd left super early. I, in my infinite wisdom, had bought this single skin tent. It was like an offer or something where you got a tent, 2 sleeping bags, and I think it was 2 head torches for £30 or something like that. So this tent that I got was an absolute piece of shit tent. It was absolutely freezing. And the first night in that tent, we both absolutely froze. stayed in touch. He actually took me back from York a couple times, because if he was ever heading back up to Newcastle and I happened to be in York, he'd be like, do you want a lift, since I'm going that way? And it would be like, oh yeah, just pick me up whenever. Like, he was one of those students that took all, like, he was very opposite from me. He's one of those students who took all of his washing back home for his mum to do, whereas I was like, no, I'm independent, I'm gonna do it all myself. At some point, because there was like another falling out between me and Alex, and I am probably skipping forwards and backwards with things. At some point there was a birthday party of his where he introduced me to a girl who he hoped that I would have a massive fight with her, but this fight didn't happen. We'd both maybe matured a little bit by this point, but he'd hoped I'd had a fight. I would have a fight with this girl, but we actually ended up becoming best friends. She was one of my bridesmaids at my wedding, and I think that was a night, was it that night, was another party, where they'd all ended up in a strip club, and I'd gone home early. I think I had work the next day, and Dancer had grabbed this girl's boobs and said, you'd be a great dancer, and she was freaked out, and Alex just dragged her out of there, like, no, you're not molesting my friend. He was a good person, he was a good friend. He met all of my flatmates when I was at university a couple times, because he'd like come over a couple times when I was living there. I can't remember why. I think it must have been like separate from picking me up for download, because we ended up going to download like 3 or 4 times together. But my flatmates kind of all knew him, or had met him at least once. He was like a very socially awkward person back then, so he didn't really like situations where he had to meet new people, but he'd met my flatmates, he'd met my best friend from university a couple times, and I think she didn't really care much for him, didn't like the person he was, but he could be a bit of an asshole back then. One of the standout memories actually from back then was he was dating this girl who lived in Ireland, and he was trying to buy her, it was either a birthday present or a Valentine's Day present, and we ended up in a sex shop. We had a very open relationship because we'd been romantically involved, but because it was such a tiny portion of our friendship, it was never really a thing, but we could always be like super open about that kind of thing with each other. So we'd ended up in this sex shop, and because he was like, you're about the same size as the girl I'm seeing, but she has bigger boobs, and he was like trying to find this outfit, and the woman, I think it was like a pair of boots he'd asked for, and the one was like, oh, what size are you? And looked at me, and it was like, oh, it's not for me. He just wants me to try on the clothes because I'm the same size, but our feet sizes are different. We used to like meet up every month pretty much and go to Nando's in the Gate in Newcastle for a hashtag cheeky Nando's, and probably disgust a load of people around us by our conversation. Like I said, we were very like open with each other about that kind of thing. I bought him, I think it was an inflatable butt plug, because he was into that kind of thing, and we were discussing that in Nando's one time. I ended up meeting him and a girlfriend there one time, where he, being an asshole, made her order the extra hot sauce at Nando's. We would like always go to gigs together. If Bowling for Soup were playing in Newcastle, he would go with me. If there was a band that he wanted to see, if it was a band I liked as well, he'd be like, do you want tickets? And we'd both go together. I've strangely stayed in contact with a guy who hit on me that night, and I was like, no, I'm not interested, but for some reason we stayed in touch. But hey, that is another story time for another time. But yeah, I think that night actually he'd been hoping that I'd have another threesome with him, because there was some girl he'd been on like a couple dates with, and he was like, oh, you can stay at mine, and she was staying there as well, and I was like, well, where am I going to sleep? And I think he hoped that we'd all sleep in like one bed together, and I made him take me back to my parents' house, which is like, he lived in the centre of York and they lived the total other side of York, so it was like, well, fine, but I'm going to charge you double for fuel. And I was like, fine, I'm not going to have a threesome with you and this girl that you met on the internet. To be fair, that girl she seemed nice, and I've actually, like, she's from around here, so I'd seen her about a couple times, but we eventually lost contact. Me and Alex did have another, the other bit first. Alex got a job in Blockbuster, I think it must have been in 2011 or 2010. He started working in Blockbuster, and he would, like, whenever we hung out, he'd be like, I'll grab some movies because I get free rentals. Sorry, Jordan just messaged me. Yeah, I get free rentals, and if there are any games and stuff, because you could get a staff discount, he'd be like, if you want any games, just let me know, I'll use my staff discount. And then one day he'd message me being like, we've got an Xbox in stock, it's like, this is the model it is, I can get it for you for this amount with my staff discount, do you want it? And I was like, yeah, sure. And so I think, like, he'd paid for it, but then I'd sent him the money, and he'd got me like a couple games as well. So he got me my first Xbox that never once, I think, connected to the internet, because I just had it like connected to the world's most ancient TV where everything looked super green for some reason. I'm jumping too far forward again. Shortly after that, I think it was. Yeah, I think it must have been shortly after that. We had a second falling out, which was more to do with the absolutely crazy girl that he was dating. She was absolutely mental. He fell out with me and the girl who I mentioned before, who had introduced us and would become best friends, fell out with both of us because we were both saying to him, this girl is toxic, you need to get rid of her. And he was like, no, I don't. So we didn't speak for several months. And at that point, I'd met, I think in the time that we weren't speaking, I'd met and started going out with Daryl, my ex-husband. And one day I'd opened up Facebook Messenger, and there was a message from Alex basically apologising, saying that he felt like he'd been a terrible friend. He had realised what a toxic person this other girl was, and if I could forgive him, he wanted to be friends. He'd done a lot of soul searching, he'd got his life back on track, he was going to be graduating from university finally. He'd not managed to graduate when he was attending originally. I think he'd been like a couple of marks short, so he'd redone his dissertation, and he'd wanted to make amends with me and the other girl, and me and her were both like, what do we do? And we're like, well, we'll meet up with him, we'll go for a Nando's, we'll hear him out. And so we all met up, we all became friends again, and then I think like shortly after that, me and Alex arranged to like go for a drink together, and while we were having a drink, he apologised and said, I'm sorry that I was always so mean to you, and he must have met Daryl shortly after that, and him and Daryl got on because all of my ex-boyfriends have a similar personality, so they all seem to get on if they ever meet. We actually all went to download together, I think shortly after that. Me, Daryl, Alex, a couple of Alex's friends, a couple of Daryl's friends, and had an amazing time. Like, to be fair, I told Daryl, I was like, by the way, this is how I know this guy, but because it wasn't a thing, because it was so far removed from the friendship that we had, there was never this, I feel threatened by this guy because I know you have this history with them. And so, yeah, we did Download Festival. Then when me and Daryl got engaged, when we got married, Alex was at the wedding. I think we'd actually gone for a meal with him and a girl he was seeing like a couple of weeks before, but unfortunately the relationship with the girl didn't work out, so we'd ended up not really knowing anyone at the wedding apart from my old uni flatmates. So he'd kind of spent the day with them because he was still a bit socially awkward at that point. And as a wedding gift he'd given, because me and my ex-husband loved the game Skyrim, he'd got like the Skyrim, not the box art, but it was like the Dovahkiin image. He'd got that on a canvas. Alex always prided himself as being someone who's really good at getting gifts. I think it must have been for like my 19th birthday or something. He got me this Green Day canvas which had like all of the album cover art up to 21st Century Breakdown on it, that basically had pride of place in my room when I was at university. But he always prided himself on being a really good gift giver. Green Day was a very important part of my life, as you would know if you saw the Draw My Life that I did, and we did disagree because of the divide between old school Green Day fans and American Idiot Green Day fans. But that again is a story for another time. But yeah, he got us that canvas as a wedding gift, and Download Blanket at this point, basically after Download, I held on to Download Blanket when me and my ex got our dog Flash. Download Blanket became the blanket that went in his bed. Ended up absolutely covered in hairs. I don't know if Download Blanket is still going. After the wedding, I'm trying to think of anything. Yeah. Basically, after me and my ex got our house together, we would every Friday have friends over for pizza, and we'd watch TV, but like we'd watch Game of Thrones or we'd watch The Strain or something like that, or we'd watch films. So we'd do that every Friday. Alex and a couple of my ex-husband's friends would come over, we'd all just order takeaway, have some food, have a laugh, and that continued up until essentially I had my daughter, or when I was heavily pregnant. I think we did a couple after she was born, but then like real life got in the way. But before all of that, Alex's dad sadly passed away at some point. I want to say it was 2014. His dad passed away while he was on holiday. He died of a heart attack, and Alex was nervous after that because he was like, maybe I have a heart condition because of this that happened to my dad. But he got himself checked out and the doctor said that he was alright. At this point in Alex's life, he was in his mid-20s. A lot of his friends were settling down, getting married, buying houses, me included, or having kids, and he felt a little bit left out. after his dad passed away, he was given some money from his dad, and the way that in his mind he saw it was, well, I should, or I could use this money for the deposit on a house, or a flat, because that's the sensible thing to do, that's what my friends are doing, that's what I'm expected to do. But then, like, he thought about, what if I use this money to do something for myself, do something that I'll enjoy? What if I use this money to go on a trip? And he did some research, and he found this 3-month tour of South America, going to like Colombia. Was it Colombia? It was South America. I believe they went to Argentina. But yeah, him and his sister booked to go on this tour, and it was going to be 3 months away. And he'd come over to say goodbye to me and my ex-husband, husband at that point, and he actually brought his Xbox over. It must have been an Xbox One at this point, and he'd bought, like, did you bring it over? No, he bought the hard drive with all the games and plugged it into our Xbox, and he was like, you can have this hard drive, all of my games, while I'm away, on the agreement that you just download, like, this was when Xbox did, like, the game of the month, where you got a free game every month. So we did that. He gave us all of his Xbox back catalogue, which was loads, because he'd collected loads when he worked at Blockbuster before it went out of business, and also, like, gaming was his only hobby. And so when he'd had the second job that he got after Blockbuster closed down, he worked in a lab for a little bit, I think, unless I'm getting that in the wrong order. He worked in the lab, and he'd basically spend half his wage on games. So I played Watch Dogs, because I had no intention of buying it, or I wasn't sure if I wanted to buy it, but, like, I played his version of Watch Dogs, and realised that I'm glad I didn't pay money for it. I don't think I played anything else actually out of his catalogue. I think that my ex probably paid more, and then after he'd come back from this 3-month trip, he'd lost a ton of weight because, well, he was, like, walking for miles every day. He looked really healthy, he looked really good, and he realised that one of the things he wanted to do with his life was he wanted to travel, but he wasn't really sure, like, how he would keep funding these trips, because, well, you need to work and have a job to be able to travel, but also you can't really travel with most jobs. So he'd done some research, or he'd spoken to some of the people he'd done a trip with, and he learnt about teaching English as a foreign language, and so he used, I think, what was left, or a little bit of what was left of his inheritance, to fund himself onto this English as a foreign language course. It was one where, like, they'd sort you out of a placement or connections to get a placement afterwards, and he spent about 3-4 months. It was, like, really intense training for this English as a foreign language course. I think, actually, yeah, just after he got back from this trip as well was when I found out I was pregnant with my daughter, and he was one of the first people I told. Like, we'd gone, at this point we'd moved on from Nando's, we'd moved on to Toby Carvery, and I told him I was pregnant in Toby Carvery at the Metro Centre, and so, yeah, he'd spent months doing this intense course, and it was after Casey was born, because I remember him being there, like, shortly after she was born. But yeah, he qualified in his teaching English as a foreign language course, and he got a placement in China, which would mean relocating based on the school that it was and the type of teaching. It would mean that he wouldn't get much pizza and one last night of watching stuff. And then he went off. I believe the first time he came back after about a year for like Christmas and stuff, we met up for food, or he'd come over, and he told us all about it, how much he was loving it over there, shown us some pictures of the students he was teaching. He was absolutely loving it. Like, it'd come on in confidence from this person that hated being around people and strangers. Like, the travelling and stuff really changed his attitude about that type of thing. And he began taking more, like, when he was able to get time off, he was able to kind of travel around Asia and stuff, so he would take more trips, and he had plans of where he wanted to go before he got to a certain age. He said at one point he wanted to have a stamp on every page in his passport. And the last time I actually saw him, the last time he came back to the UK, was just the start of February, I think, or middle of February. It was before lockdown became a thing, of 2020. It was as the borders were beginning to close on China, but he was still able to get out and back in. Like, he did worry that he might not be able to get back in, but he came over because he would lose access to NHS because he'd been out of the country for that long. And we went for a Toby Carvery, and we discussed like my divorce and stuff. I told him about this guy named Jordan, who at that point I just started seeing officially. He told me about some girl he was seeing over in China. He told me some other stuff that happened in Thailand that I probably can't repeat on this video. And we'd parted ways, and I've done so well not to cry throughout this video. We parted ways, and we said we'd see each other again in a couple of years. We'd see each other again in a couple of years, and maybe next time I could come to Beijing. And I was like, well, my daughter can't really manage the long flight, but maybe we can work something out. And I'd actually seen my ex, I think, shortly after, and I'd mentioned, oh, by the way, Alex is back in the country if you want to see him. And he'd said, oh, well, if you want to come over for the Super Bowl, because the Super Bowl was another thing that he'd always come over to our house for. And I'd messaged Alex and said, oh, Daryl says if you want to go over to his for the Super Bowl. And he was like, well, I've already got plans, and why couldn't he message me himself? And I was like, well, why indeed? And so, yeah, that was the last time we saw each other. Communication was hard when he was in China because of the Great Firewall. I think just after lockdown, we'd messaged back and forth a little bit, asking how he was doing. Lockdowns were much stricter over there. And there'd be like the odd message about what was going on in our lives. I think the last time we probably messaged back and forth was mid-2021. There'd been like comments on Facebook statuses and posts in between, but after I got my Xbox, it was like, oh, we should play together sometime if you've got Game Pass Ultimate. And I did get Game Pass Ultimate, but we never actually got that game together. And then, yeah, last week I hear he's dead, and we'll never get that game. It's an odd feeling, because I can remember the memories and I could be happy, but then I'll think about certain things and be sad. One of the things I actually did, this will sound really lame, Hans Vikinger was a permanent part of my crew. So that we can always game together. I'll tell you just some random facts about Alex now. When he was on his trip of South America, he was so desperate to see Guardians of the Galaxy that he actually went and saw it in Spanish, or in Spanish cinema. Guardians de la Galaxia. Things in China are obviously really heavily censored. He explained how the Great Firewall of China worked. Basically, everything is edited down to a U rating, or it is not shown at all. I feel like there's like so many more things, so many more little stories that I'm probably forgetting, that I'm probably not thinking about now, that they'll pop into my head later and I'll be like, I should have mentioned this in the video. But this was essentially a massive long ramble about my friend Alex, the friendship we had, how we met, everything. I guess, like, I am back in touch with, because the girl who became my best friend, we had a falling out a few years ago, and we did get back in touch, but it was never the same, and since finding out about Alex, we've both been back in touch, and so that's a really good thing. So if you have made it this far into the video, well done. Thank you, you earn a cookie. I would just say, if you drink, have some Strongbow for Alex and for everything I've told you about him. Everyone who remembers him as a really good friend, really great guy. Like, I remember him as a bit of an asshole, but overall he was a great guy. He was both. He was our asshole. If you don't drink, have a glass of Pepsi or Coke for Alex, and hopefully wherever he is, he's still gaming. And I apologise for the ugly sad faces that